The security camera notification that would destroy 3 lives forever appeared on Rahul Kapoor's phone at 2:47 p.m. on a Tuesday afternoon in March 2024, while he sat in a client meeting discussing network infrastructure upgrades, showing motion detected in his Sugarland home's living room during hours when his wife Neha should have been at work at the Walgreens pharmacy, where she had been employed as a technician for 18 months since their arranged marriage had brought her from Dallas to Houston to begin their life together as a traditional Indian-American couple committed to family honor and cultural values. The live feed from their home security system revealed Neha sitting close to a man on their sectional sofa, the same furniture they had selected together during their early married months, when everything seemed perfect and their families celebrated their union as an ideal match between compatible backgrounds, education levels, and cultural understanding that promised a lifetime of mutual respect, shared prosperity, and the continuation of traditional values within the American context, where second-generation immigrants balanced heritage preservation with professional advancement. Rahul's immediate recognition of the man as David Miller, a colleague from Neha's pharmacy, whose casual mentions in dinner conversations had never raised suspicions about inappropriate relationships or professional boundary violations, transformed routine workplace references into devastating evidence of systematic deception that had been occurring in their family home while he worked long hours, establishing his IT consulting business and trusting completely in his wife's commitment to their marriage vows and cultural obligations. The shock of witnessing his wife's betrayal through high-definition security footage was compounded by the intimate nature of their interaction, hands touching, their bodies positioned with casual familiarity that suggested this was not their first clandestine meeting, but rather part of an established pattern of adultery that had been carefully planned around his work schedule and conducted in the sacred space of their family home, where they had celebrated festivals, hosted relatives, and planned their future together. The devastating realization that their 2-year marriage had been built on lies and deception forced Rahul to confront fundamental questions about trust, cultural identity, and family honor that went far beyond personal hurt to encompass broader concerns about community reputation, extended family relationships, and the failure of traditional arranged marriage practices to protect against the moral corruption that he believed American individualism and workplace integration could introduce into sacred family bonds. The technical sophistication of their home security system, which Rahul had installed to protect their property and provide peace of mind during his frequent business travel, now provided irrefutable documentation of his wife's infidelity with timestamp evidence and multiple camera angles that captured not only the physical betrayal, but also the emotional intimacy and comfortable familiarity that indicated their affair had been ongoing for months, while he remained completely unaware of the destruction occurring within his own home. The immediate impulse to confront them directly was tempered by his understanding that such a confrontation would require careful planning to preserve evidence and protect his legal interests in what would inevitably become a complex divorce proceeding involving cultural mediation, family intervention, and community judgment that would affect not only their immediate relationship, but also their extended family's reputations within Houston's tight-knit Indian-American professional and social community. The drive from his downtown office to their Sugarland suburb felt like a journey toward the complete destruction of everything he had worked to build since immigrating to America as a teenager, with dreams of professional success and family stability that honored both American opportunities and Indian cultural values, representing the successful integration of traditional expectations with modern achievement that had made him a respected member of their temple community and professional network. The quiet residential street where they had purchased their 4-bedroom house 18 months earlier, as newlyweds planning for children and extended family visits, now seemed like a crime scene where his trust and cultural identity would be permanently destroyed by evidence of adultery that violated not only their marriage vows, but also the fundamental expectations about family loyalty and moral behavior that had governed his understanding of appropriate relationships and community standards. The key that opened their front door felt heavier in his hand, as he realized that this moment would mark the end of one life and the beginning of another, the transformation from trusting husband and community member to betrayed spouse, a potential divorcee, whose failure to maintain his wife's fidelity would be seen by many traditional community members as evidence of his inadequacy as a husband and cultural leader within their social and religious circles. The silence that greeted him as he entered their home was broken only by muffled conversation from the living room, where Neha and David were unaware that their secret meeting had been discovered and documented through security systems that would provide legal evidence of adultery, while also serving as permanent reminders of the destruction of trust and family honor that had occurred in the space where they had once planned to raise children and maintain traditional cultural practices. The internal struggle between his desire for immediate confrontation and his recognition of the need for strategic planning created a psychological tension that reflected broader conflicts between emotional impulses and cultural obligations, individual desires and community expectations, American legal procedures, and traditional Indian approaches to marital conflict that would define not only how this crisis was resolved, but also how it would affect his identity and standing within both professional and cultural communities. The confrontation that would be remembered by all three participants as the most emotionally devastating moment of their lives began when Rahul stepped into the living room doorway and observed Neha and David separated by less than 6 inches on the sofa, their conversation stopping immediately as they turned toward him with expressions of shock and horror that confirmed their awareness of the moral and cultural violations that their affair represented to his identity and their community's expectations about marital fidelity and family honor. Neha's first words were not an explanation or apology, but a shocked whisper of, "You're home early," as if the primary issue was his unexpected presence rather than her betrayal of their marriage vows and the trust that had been the foundation of their relationship since their families had arranged their meeting through mutual friends who had vouched for both their character and their commitment to traditional values that emphasized family loyalty over individual desires and cultural preservation over American individualism. David's immediate attempt to leave was blocked by Rahul's position in the doorway and his calm request that they all sit down to discuss the situation like adults who understood the serious implications of what had been discovered. Though the tension in the room was electric, as all three participants recognized that this moment would have consequences extending far beyond their personal relationships to affect families, careers, and community standing within Houston's Indian-American social network. The security camera footage that Rahul displayed on his tablet provided undeniable evidence of their affair's duration and frequency, with timestamps showing regular afternoon meetings over a 6-week period that corresponded with his client visits and business travel, demonstrating systematic planning and deliberate deception that went far beyond momentary moral weakness into calculated betrayal of marriage vows and cultural obligations that had been central to their wedding ceremony and family expectations. Neha's breakdown into tears was accompanied by confused explanations about loneliness and emotional disconnection that she claimed had developed during their marriage, though her words revealed fundamental misunderstandings about the nature of arranged marriages and cultural expectations that emphasized gradual development of love and intimacy through shared experiences and mutual dedication to family responsibilities rather than immediate romantic passion and individual emotional fulfillment. David's discomfort and attempts to minimize his role in the affair were met with Rahul's detailed questions about his understanding of Indian cultural values and his awareness that pursuing a married woman from a traditional family would have devastating consequences, not only for the immediate relationship, but also for extended family networks and community relationships that had been built over generations of trust and mutual respect. The revelation that their affair had begun shortly after Neha started working at the pharmacy challenged Rahul's assumptions about workplace integration and professional relationships, forcing him to confront the possibility that his encouragement of her career development and financial independence had inadvertently exposed her to American cultural influences and individual relationship choices that conflicted with traditional expectations about marital exclusivity and family loyalty. The psychological impact of discovering his wife's infidelity was complicated by his recognition that their cultural background provided clear guidelines for addressing adultery through family mediation and community intervention, though the involvement of an American colleague who had no understanding of Indian cultural values created additional complications that would require navigation of both traditional and legal systems for resolving marital conflicts and protecting family honor. The immediate practical concerns included decisions about David's continued presence in their home, the preservation of evidence for potential legal proceedings, and the timing of disclosure to family members who would be devastated by news of the affair and would expect immediate action to address the moral violations and cultural betrayal that threatened the reputation and standing of both extended families within their community network. The emotional complexity of the situation was evident in Neha's contradictory expressions of remorse for hurting Rahul and defensiveness about her right to emotional fulfillment and personal happiness, reflecting the cultural conflicts between individual desires and family obligations that characterized many second-generation immigrants' struggles with identity and relationship expectations within traditional community frameworks that emphasized collective welfare over personal satisfaction. The conversation that continued for over 2 hours covered topics ranging from the specific timeline of the affair to broader questions about cultural identity, marital expectations, and the balance between traditional values and American social norms that had created the conditions for this crisis, while also determining how it would be resolved through family consultation, community mediation, and potentially legal proceedings that would address both personal betrayal and cultural violations. The documentation that Rahul compiled during this confrontation would later prove crucial in legal proceedings and family mediation efforts, including recorded conversations, security footage, and written statements that provided comprehensive evidence of the affair's duration and impact, while also preserving his rights and protecting his reputation within both professional and cultural communities that valued moral, behavior, and family stability above individual desires and romantic passion. The immediate aftermath of the confrontation was characterized by David Miller's hasty departure from their home and Rahul's insistence that Neha remain to participate in the difficult conversations that would be necessary to address the cultural and legal implications of her adultery, including decisions about family notification, community disclosure, and the potential for reconciliation versus divorce within the framework of traditional Indian expectations and American legal procedures that would govern their future relationship and family obligations. Neha's emotional state alternated between genuine remorse for the pain she had caused and defensive justifications for seeking emotional connection outside their marriage, revealing deep misunderstandings about the nature of arranged marriages and the cultural expectations that emphasized patient development of intimacy and love through shared experiences rather than immediate romantic fulfillment, individual emotional satisfaction that characterized American dating relationships and marriage expectations. The phone call to Rahul's older brother Vikram in Dallas represented his first attempt to seek family guidance and cultural advice about addressing adultery within the framework of traditional values and community expectations, though the conversation revealed the complexity of navigating moral violations that involved American colleagues and workplace relationships that were outside the experience and understanding of their parents' generation. Traditional community authorities. The decision to consult with their temple's cultural advisors and family counseling services reflected Rahul's commitment to addressing the crisis through traditional mechanisms for resolving marital conflicts, while also recognizing that Neha's affair with an American colleague created unique challenges that would require integration of cultural mediation with contemporary therapeutic approaches and possibly legal intervention to protect his rights and reputation. The investigation into the full extent of Neha's deception revealed additional evidence of systematic dishonesty, including false explanations for overtime work, fabricated social events with female colleagues, and unauthorized changes to their home security system, settings that suggested she had been aware of the surveillance capabilities while planning her affair and attempting to conceal evidence of her meetings with David from her husband and family. The impact on David Miller's life became apparent when his supervisor at the pharmacy chain was notified about the affair and its potential impact on workplace relationships and professional conduct standards, leading to his temporary suspension. While Human Resources investigated potential violations of company policies regarding relationships between employees and the personal conduct standards that were expected of healthcare professionals, working with controlled substances and confidential patient information. The cultural mediation process initiated through their temple community involved meetings with respected elders and religious advisors who attempted to provide guidance based on traditional approaches to marital conflict resolution. Though their recommendations were complicated by the intercultural nature of the affair and the involvement of American legal and professional systems that operated according to different principles than traditional Indian family community mediation practices. The psychological evaluation that Neha underwent as part of the mediation process revealed underlying depression and anxiety that had contributed to her emotional vulnerability and her susceptibility to the attention and affection that David had provided. Though the cultural counselors emphasized that mental health challenges did not excuse adultery or justify the systematic deception that had violated her marriage vows and damaged her family's reputation within their community. The legal consultation that Rahul pursued with attorneys specializing in divorce and family law within multicultural communities provided him with information about his rights and options within the American legal system, including procedures for evidence preservation, asset protection, and custody considerations that would be relevant if reconciliation proved impossible and divorce proceedings became necessary to protect his interests and preserve his standing within both professional and cultural communities. The community response to news of the affair was swift and largely supportive of Rahul, while expressing disappointment and concern about Neha's behavior, though some community members questioned whether his focus on career development and financial success had contributed to emotional neglect that might have made his wife vulnerable to outside attention and affection from colleagues who provided the personal connection that had been lacking in their marriage relationship. The workplace investigation conducted by the pharmacy chain revealed that David and Neha's relationship had been observed by other employees who had chosen not to report their concerns about inappropriate behavior due to uncertainty about company policies and reluctance to interfere in personal relationships. Though their testimony provided additional documentation of the affair's duration and the systematic nature of the deception that had been required to maintain their secret meetings. The impact on both extended families was devastating, as parents and relatives struggled to understand how an arranged marriage that had seemed successful and culturally appropriate could have been undermined by workplace relationships and American cultural influences that had provided alternatives to traditional family structures and marital expectations that emphasized duty and gradual development of love over immediate romantic passion and individual emotional fulfillment. The family crisis intervention organized by both sets of parents 3 weeks after the discovery of Neha's affair brought together relatives from Dallas and Houston in an attempt to provide traditional cultural guidance for resolving the marital conflict while preserving family honor and community relationships that had been damaged by the adultery and the systematic deception that had been required to maintain the affair with David Miller over a period of 6 weeks. The traditional mediation process involved separate meetings with Neha and Rahul to understand their perspectives and grievances, while also providing cultural education about marital expectations and family responsibilities that emphasized the importance of sacrifice and patience in developing successful long-term relationships that serve not only individual happiness, but also community stability and the preservation of cultural values across generations of Indian American families. Neha's testimony during these family meetings revealed the depth of her emotional dissatisfaction with their marriage and her feelings of isolation and loneliness that had made her vulnerable to David's attention and affection. Though family elders emphasized that her legitimate concerns about emotional connection and marital intimacy should have been addressed through proper channels, including family consultation and professional counseling, rather than through adultery that had violated sacred vows and damaged family reputation. The revelation that Neha had discussed divorce and separation with David Miller before being discovered by Rahul created additional complications for the mediation process, as it suggested that her affair was not merely emotional infidelity or momentary weakness, but rather part of a systematic plan to exit her marriage and pursue a relationship that promised greater personal fulfillment and individual freedom from traditional cultural expectations and family obligations. Rahul's willingness to consider reconciliation despite the profound betrayal and cultural humiliation he had experienced was viewed by family elders as evidence of his maturity and commitment to traditional values, though they also emphasized that any successful reconciliation would require Neha to demonstrate genuine remorse and commitment to rebuilding trust through transparency, cultural counseling, and permanent elimination of contact with David Miller, and similar temptations that threatened marital stability. The psychological assessment arranged through culturally competent therapists revealed that both Neha and Rahul were experiencing trauma related to their cultural identity conflicts and the pressure to balance individual desires with traditional expectations about marriage and family responsibilities, requiring therapeutic approaches that respected their cultural background while addressing contemporary relationship challenges and communication issues that had contributed to their marital problems. The workplace consequences for David Miller escalated when the pharmacy chain's investigation revealed that he had used company resources, including work computers and phones, to coordinate his meetings with Neha, violating professional conduct standards and creating potential liability issues for his employer, who was concerned about the impact on workplace relationships and the company's reputation within the healthcare community, where ethical behavior and professional boundaries were essential for maintaining public trust. The community's response to the ongoing crisis was divided between those who supported attempts at reconciliation based on traditional values that emphasized forgiveness and family preservation, and others who believed that Neha's behavior had been so damaging to family honor and cultural integrity that divorce was the only appropriate response that would protect Rahul's reputation and send clear messages about the consequences of violating marital vows and cultural expectations. The legal complexities surrounding potential divorce proceedings were complicated by the couple's financial entanglement, including joint ownership of their home, shared business investments, and the cultural expectation that Neha's family would be responsible for returning the dowry and wedding gifts if the marriage ended due to her adultery, creating significant financial pressures that influenced both families' preferences for reconciliation over divorce, despite the severity of the trust violations. The therapeutic work required for potential reconciliation included individual counseling for both spouses to address their personal issues and relationship expectations, couples therapy to rebuild communication and trust, and cultural counseling to help them navigate the intersection of traditional values with contemporary American relationship challenges that had created the conditions for their crisis, while also providing frameworks for healing and rebuilding their marriage. The ongoing investigation into the full scope of Neha's deception revealed additional instances of dishonesty, including false social media posts that portrayed their marriage as happy and successful while she was actively pursuing her affair, creating a public facade that had misled friends and family, while enabling her to maintain her relationship with David without immediate discovery or intervention from concerned community members. The impact on David Miller's personal life extended beyond his professional consequences to include social isolation within his own community, as news of his affair with a married Indian woman spread through workplace networks, social connections, creating reputation damage that would affect his future employment opportunities and personal relationships within the healthcare industry, where ethical behavior was highly valued and professional misconduct could have long-lasting career consequences. The attempted reconciliation process that began 2 months after the discovery of Neha's affair was structured around traditional Indian cultural practices combined with contemporary marriage counseling techniques, requiring both spouses to participate in intensive therapy, while also engaging with community elders and religious advisors who provided guidance about rebuilding trust and restoring family honor within the framework of cultural values that emphasized forgiveness and second chances for marriages that served broader community interests. The conditions established by Rahul's family for supporting reconciliation included Neha's complete termination of employment at the pharmacy where she had worked with David Miller, her participation in cultural counseling and religious education programs designed to reinforce traditional values about marriage and family responsibilities, and her acceptance of enhanced transparency measures, including supervised social activities and limited independent decision-making authority, until trust could be gradually rebuilt through consistent behavior over extended periods. Neha's initial resistance to these requirements reflected her continued struggle with cultural expectations that seemed to limit her individual autonomy and personal freedom, though her eventual acceptance was influenced by her recognition that divorce would result in permanent social disgrace and family rejection that would affect not only her own future prospects but also her younger sister's marriage. Opportunities within their traditional community, where family reputation directly influenced arranged marriage negotiations and social acceptance. The psychological evaluation conducted as part of the reconciliation process revealed that both Neha and Rahul were experiencing symptoms of post-traumatic stress related to the betrayal and its aftermath, requiring specialized therapeutic interventions that addressed cultural identity conflicts, trust rebuilding, and communication improvement, within the context of traditional marriage expectations that differed significantly from contemporary American relationship models that emphasized individual fulfillment and emotional compatibility. The supervision and monitoring arrangements that were established to support the reconciliation process included regular check-ins with family members and community advisors, restricted social activities and workplace choices, and enhanced communication requirements that would allow both families to assess progress toward rebuilding the marriage, while also providing early warning signs if additional deception or inappropriate relationships threatened the reconciliation effort. The impact on David Miller's life continued to escalate as his termination from the pharmacy chain was followed by difficulty finding alternative employment within the healthcare industry, where background checks and professional references revealed his involvement in the affair and its consequences for workplace relationships and professional conduct standards that were essential for positions involving patient care, controlled substances management. The community healing process included public acknowledgement of the crisis and the steps being taken to address it through traditional mechanisms, providing other families with examples of how cultural mediation and family intervention could be used to resolve marital conflicts while preserving cultural values and community cohesion, despite the challenges created by American individualism and workplace integration that exposed traditional marriages to alternative relationship models. The financial costs associated with the reconciliation process included expenses for intensive therapy, cultural counseling, temporary relocation to facilitate separation from tempting influences, and the economic impact of Neha's job loss and reduced earning potential, creating additional stress that complicated efforts to rebuild their relationship while also serving as practical consequences for the adultery that reinforced cultural lessons about the comprehensive costs of violating marriage, vows, and family expectations. The progress toward reconciliation was slow and complicated by ongoing trust issues, cultural conflicts about individual autonomy versus family responsibilities, and the persistent impact of community judgment and social stigma that affected their ability to participate normally in cultural events and social activities, where their crisis had become common knowledge among friends and relatives who continued to monitor their behavior and relationship dynamics. The therapeutic insights that emerged from their marriage counseling revealed fundamental communication problems and incompatible expectations about marriage roles and responsibilities that had existed from the beginning of their relationship, but had been masked by cultural assumptions about arranged marriages, automatically producing successful partnerships without the need for ongoing emotional work and relationship development that characterized successful contemporary marriages, regardless of cultural background. The legal consultation that continued throughout the reconciliation process provided Rahul with ongoing protection of his rights and interests, while also establishing clear documentation of the steps being taken to rebuild their marriage, ensuring that any future legal proceedings would reflect his good faith efforts to preserve their relationship according to cultural values and community expectations, while also protecting himself from additional financial or emotional damage if the reconciliation ultimately failed. The monitoring and evaluation procedures established by both families included regular assessment of progress toward rebuilding trust and cultural integration, with clear benchmarks and expectations that would determine whether the reconciliation was successful enough to restore normal marriage relationships and community acceptance, or whether additional intervention or ultimate divorce might be necessary to protect all parties' interests and preserve family honor within their cultural framework. The reconciliation attempt that had shown initial promise during the first 6 months began to deteriorate when Neha's resentment about the restrictions and supervision imposed by both families created ongoing tension and conflict that undermined the trust-building process, while also revealing her continued struggle with cultural expectations that prioritized family honor and community stability over individual autonomy and personal emotional fulfillment that she had found in her relationship with David Miller. The discovery of continued contact between Neha and David Miller through social media platforms and encrypted messaging applications represented a devastating setback that destroyed much of the progress that had been made toward reconciliation, while also demonstrating that her apparent commitment to rebuilding their marriage had been partially fabricated to appease family pressure, rather than representing genuine remorse and dedication to cultural values and marital responsibilities. The family crisis meeting that was convened in response to this new betrayal involved heated discussions about the appropriateness of continuing reconciliation efforts versus proceeding with divorce proceedings that would protect Rahul's reputation and send clear messages to the community about the consequences of repeated violations of marriage vows and cultural expectations that governed appropriate behavior for married women within traditional Indian American family structures. Rahul's decision to proceed with divorce was influenced by his recognition that Neha's continued deception indicated fundamental character flaws and cultural incompatibility that could not be resolved through counseling, family intervention, while also reflecting his understanding that his own credibility and leadership within their community required decisive action to address repeated violations of trust and cultural values that threatened family honor and social standing. The legal proceedings that followed were complicated by cultural considerations about appropriate grounds for divorce within traditional Indian communities, financial arrangements that reflected both American legal requirements and cultural expectations about family responsibility for marriage failures, and custody considerations that would determine how any future children would be raised within the complex intersection of American legal frameworks and traditional cultural values. The community response to the divorce announcement was largely supportive of Rahul's decision, while expressing disappointment and concern about Neha's apparent rejection of cultural values and family guidance that had been offered to help her preserve her marriage and maintain her standing within their traditional social network, where divorce carried significant stigma and social consequences for women who were viewed as having failed in their primary family responsibilities. The impact on Neha's family was severe, as they struggled with the social stigma and financial obligations associated with their daughter's behavior, while also attempting to protect their younger daughter's marriage prospects within a community where family reputation directly influenced arranged marriage negotiations and social acceptance among potential spouses and their families who valued moral character and cultural commitment above individual attributes. The psychological assessment conducted during the divorce proceedings revealed that Neha's continued contact with David Miller, despite family intervention and reconciliation efforts, indicated underlying personality traits and value conflicts that made successful integration into traditional marriage relationships unlikely without fundamental changes in her understanding of cultural obligations and family responsibilities that extended beyond individual desires and romantic preferences. The workplace consequences for David Miller continued to expand as his involvement in destroying an Indian American marriage became known within healthcare employment networks, creating professional reputation damage that affected his ability to secure positions within pharmacy chains and healthcare facilities that valued ethical behavior and cultural sensitivity in their diverse employee populations and patient communities. The mediation process that attempted to resolve property division and financial arrangements reflected both American legal requirements and traditional cultural expectations about compensation for marriage failure, creating complex negotiations that addressed not only immediate financial concerns, but also long-term obligations and reputation repair that would be necessary for both families to maintain their standing within their community networks. The documentation process required for the divorce proceedings included comprehensive evidence of Neha's adultery and continued deception, security camera footage and communication records that would be preserved as legal evidence, while also serving as permanent reminders of the systematic nature of her betrayal and the extensive planning that had been required to maintain her affair while appearing to participate genuinely in reconciliation efforts. The cultural counseling that continued throughout the divorce process helped both families understand how American workplace integration and individualistic values could create conflicts with traditional marriage expectations, while also providing guidance about maintaining family, honor, and community relationships, despite the personal and social disruption caused by Neha's choices and their inevitable consequences for everyone involved in their extended family networks. The finalization of Rahul and Neha's divorce 8 months after the discovery of her affair, marked the end of what had been considered a promising arranged marriage and created lasting implications for both extended families' reputations within Houston's Indian American community, while also serving as a cautionary tale about the challenges of maintaining traditional cultural values within American social and professional environments that offered alternative relationship models and individual lifestyle choices. The custody arrangements that were established through the divorce proceedings reflected the fact that Neha and Rahul had no children together, eliminating one potential source of ongoing conflict while also removing what might have been a motivating factor for more intensive reconciliation efforts and family intervention designed to preserve their marriage for the benefit of future generations and the continuation of cultural traditions within their family lineages. The financial settlement that was negotiated included provisions for Neha's return of wedding gifts and dowry contributions that had been provided by Rahul's family, according to traditional customs, while also addressing the division of marital assets and debts that had been accumulated during their 2-year marriage, including their home mortgage and joint investments that required legal resolution according to American community, property laws, and cultural expectations about financial responsibility. The impact on David Miller's life reached its culmination when criminal charges were filed against him for workplace harassment and violation of professional conduct standards that had created a hostile work environment for other employees who had been aware of his inappropriate relationship with a married colleague, leading to legal consequences that extended far beyond his original involvement in the affair to include potential criminal penalties and professional licensing issues. The community healing process that followed the divorce included discussions about prevention strategies and support systems that might help other young couples navigate the cultural conflicts and workplace challenges that had contributed to Neha's affair, while also reinforcing traditional values about marriage commitment and family loyalty that remained essential for maintaining cultural identity and social cohesion within immigrant communities facing American assimilation pressures. Detective Marcus Allen's involvement in the case began when David Miller's escalating harassment of Neha following their breakup led to restraining order violations and stalking behavior that created safety concerns for both Neha and Rahul, demonstrating how the original adultery had evolved into criminal behavior that required law enforcement intervention to protect all parties from potential violence and ongoing intimidation. The psychological evaluation ordered by the court as part of the restraining order proceedings revealed that David Miller was experiencing significant mental health issues related to his job loss and social isolation, including depression and anxiety that had contributed to his inappropriate fixation on Neha and his inability to accept the end of their relationship, despite the obvious legal and social consequences of his continued pursuit of contact with her. The restraining order that was issued against David Miller included provisions prohibiting any contact with either Neha or Rahul and requiring him to maintain specified distances from their homes, workplaces, and regular social activities, while also mandating psychological counseling and anger management therapy that would address his stalking behavior and help him develop appropriate coping mechanisms for relationship, rejection, and social consequences. The ongoing investigation conducted by Detective Allen revealed that David's behavior had escalated to include surveillance of both Neha and Rahul's activities, unauthorized visits to their workplaces and homes, and threatening communications that suggested potential for violence if his demands for renewed contact and relationship resumption were not met, creating a dangerous situation that required enhanced security measures and continuous law enforcement monitoring. The testimony provided by Neha during the restraining order hearings documented the progression of David's behavior from romantic pursuit to harassment and intimidation, including his refusal to accept her marriage obligations and cultural commitments that made continued relationship impossible, regardless of her personal feelings or his declarations of love and promises of lifestyle alternatives that would require her to abandon her family and cultural identity. The evidence gathered by law enforcement included surveillance footage, communication records, and witness statements that demonstrated the systematic nature of David's harassment campaign and his disregard for legal boundaries and social norms that governed appropriate behavior following the end of relationships, particularly relationships that had been inappropriate and destructive from their inception due to cultural and marital conflicts. The impact on both Neha and Rahul's ability to rebuild their lives was significantly complicated by David's ongoing harassment and the security concerns that required them to modify their daily routines, professional activities, and social interactions to avoid potential confrontations or dangerous situations that could result from his continued obsession with renewing contact and pursuing relationships that had been permanently terminated through divorce, legal intervention. The escalation of David Miller's stalking behavior 18 months after the divorce required enhanced law enforcement intervention when his harassment expanded to include threats against Rahul's business clients and professional reputation, along with attempts to sabotage Neha's employment opportunities within Houston's healthcare industry through false accusations and character assassination that created additional victims and demonstrated the comprehensive nature of his mental breakdown following the affair's discovery and legal consequences. The restraining order violations that accumulated against David Miller included documented instances of unauthorized contact, surveillance activities, and threatening communications that established patterns of escalating behavior and disregard for legal authorities that supported enhanced criminal charges and longer-term incarceration that would protect both Neha and Rahul from continued harassment while providing David with mandatory mental health treatment in a controlled institutional environment. The psychological evaluation conducted during David's competency hearings revealed severe personality disorders and substance abuse issues that had contributed to his inability to accept the end of his relationship with Neha, while also explaining his escalating criminal behavior and his persistent delusion that he could resume their affair despite her marriage obligations, divorce proceedings, and explicit rejection of any future contact or relationship development. The impact on Houston's Indian American community included enhanced awareness about the potential dangers of workplace relationships and the importance of cultural education for American colleagues who might not understand the serious implications of pursuing romantic relationships with married individuals from traditional backgrounds where family, honor, and community reputation were central to social identity and economic security. Detective Marcus Allen's investigation revealed connections between David's case and similar incidents involving workplace harassment and stalking behavior within multicultural professional environments, leading to enhanced training programs for law enforcement officers and workplace security personnel who needed to understand cultural factors and family dynamics that could influence victim behavior and community response to harassment and domestic violence situations. The victim impact statements prepared by both Neha and Rahul documented the comprehensive damage caused by David's behavior, including professional disruption, social isolation, psychological trauma, and financial costs associated with security measures and legal proceedings that had been necessary to protect themselves from continued harassment and potential violence that threatened their ability to rebuild their lives following the divorce. The sentencing hearing that resulted in David Miller receiving 3 years imprisonment for stalking and harassment was attended by community members who provided testimony about the broader impact of his behavior on family relationships and social cohesion within their cultural network, while also demonstrating community support for victims of cross-cultural harassment and the importance of legal protection for individuals trying to maintain traditional values within American society. The probation conditions established for David's eventual release included mandatory psychological treatment, substance abuse counseling, and permanent prohibition from contact with Neha, Rahul, or members of their families and community networks, along with geographic restrictions that would prevent him from living or working in areas where he might encounter his victims or others from their cultural community who had been affected by his harassment campaign. The community education initiatives that were developed in response to this case included cultural sensitivity training for workplace managers and human resources professionals who needed to understand how cross-cultural relationships and harassment could create complex legal and social problems that extended far beyond individual workplace dynamics to affect entire cultural communities and family networks that were interconnected through traditional social and economic relationships. The ongoing monitoring and support services provided to both Neha and Rahul included safety planning, professional counseling, and community advocacy that helped them rebuild their lives while maintaining awareness about potential future risks and the importance of reporting any violations of legal restrictions or concerning behavior that might indicate renewed harassment, or stalking activity by David or others who might be influenced by his example. The legal precedents established through this case influenced how similar situations involving cross-cultural harassment and stalking would be investigated and prosecuted in the future, particularly regarding the treatment of cultural factors and community impact in determining appropriate charges and sentencing for defendants whose behavior threatened not only individual victims, but also broader cultural communities and traditional family structures. The research initiatives funded through victim advocacy organizations continued to study the long-term impact of workplace harassment and cross-cultural stalking on immigrant communities, while also developing prevention strategies and support services that could help other potential victims recognize warning signs and seek appropriate intervention before harassment escalated to dangerous levels that required law enforcement involvement and legal protection. The 5-year follow-up assessment of the case revealed the lasting impact on all participants and their broader community networks, with Rahul successfully rebuilding his professional reputation and establishing a new marriage within traditional cultural frameworks, while Neha struggled with ongoing social stigma and employment challenges that reflected the long-term consequences of her choices and their violation of cultural expectations about marriage, loyalty, and family honor. The community's evolution in response to this tragedy included enhanced pre-marriage counseling programs that addressed cultural identity conflicts and workplace integration challenges, along with improved support systems for young couples navigating the intersection of traditional values and American professional environments that could create temptations and conflicts, requiring ongoing guidance and community support to maintain marriage stability and cultural continuity. Neha's eventual remarriage to an American colleague who understood and accepted her cultural background represented her successful integration of individual autonomy with cultural identity, though her path to this resolution required years of therapy, community service, and gradual rehabilitation of her reputation within modified social networks that were more accepting of cultural adaptation and individual growth following personal crisis and moral failure. The psychological research that continued to emerge from detailed study of this case contributed to enhanced understanding of how cultural identity conflicts could create vulnerability to inappropriate relationships and workplace harassment, while also advancing knowledge about effective therapeutic interventions and prevention strategies for individuals and families navigating the intersection of traditional values and contemporary American social and professional environments. The victim advocacy work that grew from this case included specialized programs for supporting individuals affected by cross-cultural harassment and stalking, with particular attention to the unique challenges faced by immigrant communities, where traditional cultural values and American legal systems created complex dynamics that required specialized knowledge and culturally competent intervention strategies to provide effective protection and support. The workplace policy changes that were implemented by healthcare employers in response to this case included enhanced training about professional boundaries and cultural sensitivity, improved reporting procedures for inappropriate relationships and harassment, and strengthened consequences for employees whose personal conduct created hostile work environments or endangered colleagues from vulnerable cultural backgrounds. The educational initiatives that were developed for young Indian American professionals included workshops about maintaining cultural identity while participating in American workplace culture, recognition of potential relationship conflicts and harassment situations, and strategies for seeking appropriate support when traditional values and contemporary professional environments created personal conflicts or safety concerns. The ongoing monitoring of David Miller's compliance with legal restrictions and treatment requirements continued throughout his incarceration and probation periods, providing law enforcement with valuable experience in managing cross-cultural stalking cases, while also ensuring that victims remained protected from potential future harassment or violence from individuals whose mental health issues and cultural misunderstandings had created dangerous obsessions. The community healing and education programs that were established in response to this case continued to provide resources for other families and individuals dealing with similar cultural conflicts and workplace challenges, while also contributing to broader understanding of how immigrant communities could maintain their traditional values while successfully integrating into American professional and social environments. The technological security measures that were implemented to protect both Neha and Rahul from continued harassment included enhanced home and workplace security systems, communication monitoring services, and digital privacy protection that provided ongoing safety, while also documenting any attempts at contact or surveillance that might indicate renewed criminal behavior or violations of legal restrictions. The research partnerships that were established between law enforcement agencies and academic institutions studying cross-cultural crime and harassment provided ongoing analysis of this case and similar incidents, contributing to enhanced understanding of prevention strategies and intervention techniques that could protect vulnerable individuals while respecting cultural diversity and traditional family structures within American society. 10 years after Rahul Kapoor discovered his wife Neha with her co-worker David Miller in their Sugarland home, the ripple effects of that afternoon continue to influence not only the individuals directly involved, but also the broader Indian American community in Houston that struggled to understand how workplace integration and American cultural influences could threaten traditional marriage relationships and create dangerous situations requiring law enforcement intervention and long-term community healing efforts. The transformation of all participants in this tragedy demonstrates both the resilience of cultural communities and the serious consequences of choices that violate traditional values and family expectations. Rahul's successful second marriage within appropriate cultural frameworks and his continued leadership in their temple community represent his ability to rebuild trust and family honor, while maintaining his commitment to traditional values despite the traumatic experience of betrayal and its aftermath. Neha's journey toward rehabilitation and eventual remarriage required years of therapy, community service, and gradual acceptance by modified social networks that were more understanding of cultural adaptation and individual growth following personal crisis, though her path remained complicated by ongoing social stigma and employment challenges that reflected the long-term consequences of violating cultural expectations about marriage, loyalty, and family honor. David Miller's incarceration and mandatory treatment provided him with mental health resources and substance abuse counseling that addressed the underlying issues contributing to his harassment and stalking behavior, though his release from prison was followed by continued geographic restrictions and monitoring requirements that protected his victims, while also limiting his own opportunities for employment and social integration within healthcare communities. The community's response to this tragedy evolved to include enhanced educational programs about workplace relationships and cultural boundaries, improved support systems for young couples navigating identity conflicts, and strengthened prevention strategies that helped other families avoid similar crises while maintaining cultural traditions and family stability within American professional and social environments. The legal precedents established through the prosecution of David Miller's harassment and stalking behavior influenced how similar cross-cultural cases would be investigated and prosecuted, providing law enforcement with enhanced understanding of cultural factors and community dynamics that affected victim behavior and required specialized intervention strategies to provide effective protection and support. The victim advocacy services and community support programs that were developed in response to this case continued to provide assistance for individuals and families affected by workplace harassment and cross-cultural stalking, demonstrating the ongoing need for culturally competent resources that could address the intersection of traditional values and American legal systems in protecting vulnerable community members. The workplace policy changes and training programs that were implemented by healthcare employers and professional organizations provided enhanced protection for employees from diverse cultural backgrounds, while also educating colleagues about appropriate professional boundaries and the serious consequences of pursuing inappropriate relationships with married individuals from traditional cultural backgrounds. The psychological research and therapeutic innovations that emerged from studying this case contributed to enhanced understanding of cultural identity conflicts and their impact on relationship stability, while also providing mental health professionals with improved approaches for helping individuals and families navigate the intersection of traditional values and contemporary American social expectations. The educational initiatives that were developed for immigrant communities included comprehensive programs about maintaining cultural identity while participating in American workplace culture, recognizing and responding to harassment situations, and accessing appropriate legal and community support when traditional values in contemporary environments created personal conflicts or safety concerns. The ongoing impact of this case extends beyond the immediate participants to include lasting changes in community awareness, prevention strategies, and support systems that protect vulnerable individuals while preserving cultural traditions and family structures that remain central to immigrant community identity and social cohesion within American society. The story of Rahul, Neha, and David serves as both a cautionary tale about the dangers of violating cultural expectations and marriage commitments, and an inspiring example of community resilience and healing in response to personal crisis and cultural conflict, demonstrating that traditional values and American opportunities can coexist when communities respond with wisdom, compassion, and commitment to protecting vulnerable members while maintaining cultural integrity. The legacy of this case continues through the families who have been protected by enhanced prevention programs, the communities that have developed more effective support systems for cultural conflicts and workplace challenges, and the broader understanding of how traditional marriage expectations and contemporary professional environments require careful navigation and ongoing community support to maintain stability and prevent dangerous situations that threaten individual safety and cultural continuity.